Our revels now are ended. These our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which inherit it shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep.
When Dark Shadows went off the air, the audience was left with an estate full of troubled characters and many questions as to their fate. Dark Shadows writer Sam Hall gives us some ideas of what they actually did with the rest of their lives. Elizabeth Collins Stoddard remained the matriarch of Collinwood. After the sudden death of her brother Roger, she was determined to hold the Collins business empire together until Roger's son David was old enough to take over. And she did, with the help of an elegant, very bright man she brought from Boston to help her. And with him, she finally found some personal happiness. Carolyn Stoddard found herself more and more interested in the world of the occult. She knew that with the death of her husband Jeb Hawkes, one part of her life was finished, and she determined to understand the unknown forces which had taken him from her. She began studying with T. Eliot Stokes, and then went on to a large university which had a department of psychic research. While there, she discovered that she herself was the reincarnation of Letitia Fay, a woman who had lived at Collinwood during the 19th century. Working with the various mediums, she became a psychic research investigator. She published many books on the supernatural and established a foundation to examine the existing evidences of the world beyond. She continued to regard Collinwood as her home and established a mother-daughter relationship with Amy Jennings, which contributed greatly to the stability of that confused and very scared young child. Years later, Carolyn re-met Adam, who had loved her so deeply. He had become a successful and sophisticated man, and he wanted to marry her. But she knew that she could not go back in time, so they parted warm friends. As time went on, Quentin Collins found living at Collinwood more and more difficult. He was unable to forget his love for Daphne, though both she and Gerard were finally at peace, and he was afraid to love again, afraid that his own secret would be discovered. For as long as Charles Delaware Tate's portrait of him existed, Quentin would not age, and he well knew that if he destroyed the picture, he would suffer the awful curse of the werewolf. Finally, he left the town of Collinsport to roam the world, Athens, Alexandria, India, always hunting some solution for his existence. Often he was tempted to return to Collinwood, destroy the portrait, and kill himself before the full moon could cause him to change into the Wolfman. But some slight hope stopped him from his doing that, for at the beginning of his travels, he had heard rumors that there existed a man with a wooden hand and miraculous powers, a man who had transcended time, a Count Batoffi. And so Quentin kept on looking for the Count, knowing that if he could find him again, perhaps the Count could take pity on him and help him to find peace at last. Maggie Evans, who left Collinwood with Sebastian Shaw, returned a year later a divorced woman. She moved into her father's cottage and began working at Wincliffe, the private sanitarium. There she re-met her former fiancé, Joe Haskell. With her help, Joe managed to regain his sanity. He left the sanitarium with no memory of Angelique and the circumstances which had caused him to lose his mind. Joe and Maggie married. He returned to the Collins fishing fleet, and they lived happily in Collinsport. But Chris Jennings and Sabrina Stewart did not have Maggie and Joe's luck, for they found they could not run from the curse that afflicted him. Though they had a few days of happiness when they left Collinsport, they both were aware that time was their enemy. For soon the moon would be full. Chris would become the werewolf again. They constructed a cell to lock him in, but when he became the Wolfman, he broke out of the cell and killed Sabrina. Her brother Ned found her body that same night. The following morning, Chris returned to their home. When he discovered what he had done, he committed suicide. Barnabas was deeply affected by Chris's death. He and Julia Hoffman had tried desperately to help Chris. Barnabas identified with him very much. Julia and Willie Loomis decided they must get Barnabas to leave Collinsport. He finally agreed to go, but Barnabas became very ill. A fever so ravaged him that Julia feared for his very existence. She managed to cure him, but in the course of the treatment, she contracted the illness herself. Julia was near death when Barnabas, who was well now, came to her. He realized just how much he loved her, and he promised that if she lived, they would marry. And they were married in Singapore. Barnabas Collins at last could walk in the light of day, walk with the woman he loved. No audience will see these stories, but for those whom the characters seemed real, these are merely signposts, pointing a direction the characters might have gone.